Deep in the woods, where the trees grow thick and silent, there is a place that remembers everything we forget. It does not speak with a voice, but with an echo. Elias walked these paths for 40 years, carrying stories too heavy to keep, but too precious to discard. He believed they vanished into the wind, lost to the silence between the leaves. But on his final evening, as the sun dipped below the canopy, a sound drifted from the hollow of an ancient oak. It was his own voice, reciting a story he had never spoken aloud. He froze. The cadence was perfect, the inflection exact. It was a memory he had buried decades ago, now rising from the earth like water, finding its level. Was it magic? Or was the forest simply a mirror, reflecting back the fragments of lives lived within its shade? Elias realized then that silence is not empty. It is full of waiting. He stepped closer to the tree, heart pounding against his ribs. If the forest could remember, what else had it kept? And why did it choose him to hear it now? Deep in the pines, the wind carries Elias's voice before he ever opens his mouth. It is not an echo of sound, but a resonance of intent, vibrating through the roots long before the words leave his lips. Elias steps into the clearing, unaware that the trees are already reciting his childhood tales back to him. The air shimmers with invisible syntax, waiting for him to acknowledge the conversation that began centuries ago. He realizes then that memory is not a vault, but a river. If he does not speak the story now, the current will carry it away, leaving only silence where his history once flowed. So Elias speaks. His voice bridges the gap between past and present, turning passive data into living connection. The forest settles, satisfied, because the story has finally been heard. Deep in the valley, they found it, the Stone of Keepers. It was not a monument to power, but a fragile vessel holding the last whispers of civilizations that had chosen silence over survival. Every story ever told is encoded in its grain, vibrating with the voices of ancestors who believed memory was sacred. But the stone is cooling, and without new breath, those vibrations are fading into static. We assume silence is just the absence of noise, but here it feels heavy, like a held breath that never exhales. The stone demands participation. It cannot survive on passive observation alone. When we stop speaking, the narrative structure begins to collapse under its own weight. Cracks form in the foundation of history, not from external attack, but from internal neglect and our refusal to engage. This is an existential threat, because stories do not exist in the void. They exist only in the act of telling. To preserve the past, we must actively choose to voice these forgotten narratives again. By speaking them aloud, we transform passive memory into living connection. We become the keepers, ensuring that the echo does not fade, but resonates through every generation brave enough to listen. But this stone is not a monument, it is a cage. Inside its cold, unyielding surface, the stories of the keepers are frozen, preserved but utterly silenced, waiting for a voice that never comes. We mistake preservation for life, thinking that keeping a record safe is enough. But a story locked away is just noise without meaning, a scream trapped behind glass that no one can hear. The danger here is not forgetting the past, but losing the future. When we stop voicing these tales, we starve the present, leaving our own identities hollow because we have severed the root of who we are. So, we face an existential choice. Either we become the active keepers who breathe life into these echoes, or we become the architects of a silent world where nothing was ever truly heard. Elias stood before the crumbling archive, the stone heavy in his hands. He realized that preserving the artifact was not enough. He had to preserve the truth behind it. Instead of hiding the gaps in history, he chose radical honesty. He spoke the uncomfortable truths aloud, letting the voice fill the void where memory had failed. The stone ceased to be a static object and became a vessel for conversation. By voicing the story, Elias transformed passive memory into a living, breathing connection. Stories only survive when we actively choose to voice them. The last echo is not the stone itself, but the resonance it creates in those who listen. Now the burden shifts to you. You are the next necessary voice, the keeper of this fragile thread. Silence is no longer an option. Do not let the story fade into the dark. Speak it, share it, keep it alive. The last echo depends entirely on your willingness to begin. Elias looked at the crumbling stone, realizing that his hesitation was not protection, but a slow erosion of truth itself. He spoke the forgotten name into the cold air, and for the first time, the dust settled as if listening to a friend returning home. The story did not live in the stone, but in the breath that chose to carry it forward, waiting for your turn to speak. Do not let this echo fade into the void. Become the bridge between what was lost and what might yet be remembered by others.